Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Now that Inuyasha is getting a sequel anime called Yashahime this October, I figured now would be a perfect time to cover the lore of the original series and recap its plot for you all. This is another ambitious project, since we're talking 192 episodes and 4 movies worth of content. I've managed to condense it down to just 4 videos, so that you can all get caught up to speed with what happened an entire decade ago. I won't bog these down with a lengthy intro, so let's dive in. The bulk of Inuyasha's narrative takes place during Japan's feudal era, more specifically the Sengoku Jidai, or Warring States period. This was an unstable time between the 15th and 17th centuries, in which Japan lacked unity, instead being split into many villages and territories controlled by various warlords fighting to broaden their domain. Of course, Inuyasha glorifies this period, featuring quite literally much of the old folklore and religious aspects the nation is built upon. Most prominent are the yokai, or demons. These supernatural entities thrive in the feudal era, coming in thousands of forms, such as gigantic oni, aquatic kappa, shape-shifting kitsune, summoned familiar shikigami, mischievous tanuki, and of course the dog-like inugami. The strongest of them, the dai yokai, possess intelligence and can even take the form of humans. Generally speaking, the yokai thrive in anarchy, driven only by a survival of the fittest mentality, with humans near the bottom of the food chain. But dai yokai have far more defined and nuanced motivations, going so far as to establish their own territories within the Warring States period. Nonetheless, they tend to view humans as mere weaklings, hoisting an arrogant superiority. Ironically, this was not the case for Toga, the great dog general. Despite being a powerful and feared dai yokai, he eventually fell in love with a human woman, Izayoi, marrying her and taking up refuge in the plains of Musashi. Prior to this, he fended off the Mongols by defeating other intimidating demons, conquering many western Japanese lands. This involved taking possession of the Sounga, a sword containing the spirit of a hellish dragon. As both humans and demons coveted the blade, he decided to keep it for himself to prevent it from falling into evil hands. During his life, he had a son with another dog demon, fathering a boy named Sesshomaru, and when he married Izayoi, she became pregnant with his second son, a half-demon named Inuyasha. To protect his beloved wife, he gifted her his robe of the Fire Rat, a garment woven to withstand flames and all manner of attacks. Seriously, if these are just the rat's hairs, then the Fire Rat must be the honey badger of feudal Japan. Just doesn't give a shit. He also wished for a way to destroy Sounga if ever necessary, so he consulted the demon blacksmith Totosai and commissioned a sword to be made from his own fang. The resulting blade was the Tessaiga, a sword of destruction capable of felling 100 demons in a single strike. When wielded properly, the normally docile sword can swell to a massive size, and is imbued with an assortment of techniques Toga acquired throughout his campaign. One of these techniques, the Meido Zangetsuha, was considered so dangerous that Toga commissioned a second sword to contain its power. From Tessaiga, Totosai created a rival blade, Tenseiga, capable of saving 100 lives with a single strike. It was not a blade meant for killing, but rather for vanquishing spirits of the underworld, preventing them from claiming more lives. Thus, it could not be used to slay living beings like demons or humans. Toga used the Tessaiga to fight against a dragon demon, Ryuko Tsuse, who terrorized the land. While Toga managed to seal the dragon to a cliff face, he sustained heavy injuries that would lead to his death. Takemaru of Setsuna, a human samurai, fell in love with Toga's wife Izayoi and attempted to steal her away by attacking Toga's palace. As his men fought the guards, Takemaru made his way to Izayoi's room, only to find her in labor with Inuyasha. Not wanting anyone else to have her, Takemaru impaled Izayoi, leaving her to die while challenging her husband. Even so, she managed to birth Inuyasha just before succumbing to her wound. In turn, Takemaru died during his fight with Toga, losing his arm before ordering his men to torch the palace. Toga, still fatigued from fighting the dragon, used the last of his strength to save Izayoi's life with Tenseiga, allowing her and Inuyasha to escape, while his own building collapsed upon him. Toga's death left Inuyasha and Sesshomaru to be raised by their respective mothers. Inuyasha was raised by Izayoi, experiencing a lonely childhood as his peers rejected him for being half-demon. Sesshomaru, on the other hand, grew up to view that Toga's love for humans made him weak. Yet, it is this strength and weakness dynamic that will continue to guide the siblings. After all, Toga intended to pass on his 2 swords to his sons. To grant the lesser demon Inuyasha strength, Toga entrusted him with the Tessaiga. To teach Sesshomaru the value of life, Toga left him Tenseiga. Naturally, most demons would prefer the destructive sword, so a barrier was put on Tessaiga to prevent it from being used by full-blood demons. To further keep the blade from evil hands, it was placed in Toga's tomb, which in itself was hidden away within a black pearl placed in Inuyasha's right eye. As for the Sounga, it was sealed away deep within the Bone Eater's well, guarded by its sheath spirit Saya. By the time Inuyasha was around 10 years old, he returned from being attacked by an Oni, only to find his mother had died of natural causes. Her passing left him with two things: the protective robe of the fire rat and her rouge lip makeup. As a half-demon without his father's sword, Inuyasha felt powerless in battle, having to hide from other demons until growing out of childhood. Even then, he had to be careful on the night of the new moon, when his demon powers weaken, rendering him like any other mortal human. Being rejected as a half-breed and harboring a desire for strength led Inuyasha to pursue becoming a full-fledged demon. He eventually learned of a sacred artifact known as the Shikon Jewel that could presumably achieve this feat. The jewel itself was created when a powerful shrine maiden warrior named Midoriko fused with a colossal dragon demon at the time of her death. Midoriko lived during Japan's Heian period, and as a priestess, she was able to purify demon souls to render them powerless. This drew the ire of many demons who came to end her, and during a dramatic 7-day ambush, she found herself in the jaws of a dragon demon, Magatsuhi. This dragon was one of the strongest demons, created when many minor demons combined within the body of a man who secretly loved Midoriko. As a final effort to defeat the dragon, Midoriko fused his soul with hers, expelling the two in the form of the Shikon Jewel. While both Midoriko and the dragon had died, their souls continue to feud within the jewel, which serves as a catalyst for enhancing the strength of both humans and demons who come to possess it. As such, it can be tainted or purified based on its possessor. Several centuries passed with various demons and humans coveting its power. At the same time, in the wake of Midoriko's demise, a clan of demon slayers known as the Yokai Taijia lived near her resting place and dedicated their lives to slaying demons as she once did. Eventually, the clan's leader Shako confronted a demon, Mistress Centipede, who possessed the jewel. He managed to defeat Mistress Centipede, but discovered the jewel had been tainted by demonic power. In order to purify and watch over the jewel, the demon slayers entrusted it to Lady Kikyo, a priestess with similar powers as Midoriko. Kikyo and her sister Kaede used to wander the countryside slaying demons. Their fame drew the envy of a dark priestess named Tsubaki, who placed a curse on Kikyo, such that if she were to ever fall in love, it would be her downfall. While Kikyo knew of the curse, she did not fear it, never expecting to find love in the first place. Inuyasha discovered the jewel's location and came to Kikyo's village. He made various attempts to steal the jewel, but each time he would be repelled by Kikyo's sacred powers. Rather than resenting her for this, however, Inuyasha began to develop feelings for her. During their bouts, Inuyasha once remarked how Kikyo smelled of blood, and from then on she would take regular baths, allowing Inuyasha to watch her from afar. Because of the jewel's close proximity, Mistress Centipede revived and attacked Kikyo's little sister Kaede. Inuyasha came to Kaede's rescue, tearing through the centipede, allowing the villagers to better seal its bones in the Bone Eater's well. This brought Inuyasha and Kikyo together on amicable terms, and the two eventually became lovers. Inuyasha gave up on the jewel in order to stay with her, proving his intent by giving her his mother's makeup. Thanks to the curse Tsubaki put on her, however, Kikyo grew weaker as she fell deeper in love, causing one of her arrows not to purify an attacking demon, resulting in an explosion that deprived Kaede of her right eye. Kikyo knew her strength would continue to wane by remaining with Inuyasha, but discovered a solution. She could use the jewel, not to make him a full demon, but rather a full human. Doing so would purify the jewel, freeing Kikyo from her need to protect it, allowing the two to live a normal life together. Yet, there was one who refused to let that happen. Onigumo, a bandit coveting the Shikon Jewel, tricked Rasetsu, the leader of a bandit army, into attacking Kikyo, conveniently failing to mention she was protected by Inuyasha. As a result, Rasetsu attacked and lost his eye in the struggle, but ultimately survived. Onigumo, however, convinced Rasetsu's army to accept him as their new leader. In revenge, Rasetsu tracked Onigumo to an inn and set the building ablaze. While he lived, Onigumo was badly burned, leading Rasetsu to toss him off a cliff. This is when Kikyo found him, charred and battered. The time she spent with Inuyasha made her more compassionate, causing her to pity Onigumo and shelter him in secret. She bandaged his wounds and took care of him, earning his sincere affection in return. Tragically, despite finding new meaning in loving Kikyo, he couldn't act on it. His injuries would keep him confined for the remainder of his life. Seeking the chance to move once again, Onigumo offered his body up for lesser yokai to feed upon in exchange for their power. Similar to the man who loved Midoriko, Onigumo was surrounded by demons, all combining into his body, and yet his soul remained intact. The result was Naraku, a powerful spider half-demon. His human and demon sides have conflicting views on Kikyo. Whether he wanted Kikyo for himself or the demons wanted to kill her, both parts of him agreed to obtain the jewel. Ultimately, though, the demons within him won, and Onigumo's soul was buried into Naraku's subconscious. Thus, Naraku aimed to turn Kikyo and Inuyasha against each other. On the day Kikyo was to hand the jewel to Inuyasha, Naraku showed up disguised as Inuyasha and fatally wounded her. Similarly, he disguised himself as Kikyo to antagonize Inuyasha, turning the lovers against each other. Finally, we're at the point where the anime starts. Feeling betrayed, Inuyasha rushes into Kikyo's village and steals the jewel. In turn, Kikyo uses the last of her strength to shoot a sacred arrow at him. The arrow hits its mark, pinning Inuyasha to the Goshinboku, or sacred tree. On the verge of death, Kikyo decides to continue protecting the Shikon jewel beyond the grave, instructing Kaede to burn her alongside it. By fusing the jewel with herself, Kikyo can rid the world of its temptation. Yet, she meets her end by fire with conflicting emotions. Her bitter hatred for Inuyasha stirs the jewel's corruption. At the same time, it responds to her lingering affections to see Inuyasha again by reincarnating her soul, as well as itself, 500 years later in the modern era. Until that time, however, we've got Inuyasha stuck to the sacred tree, and Naraku running amok in feudal Japan. Thanks to time travel, though, this only goes on for about 50 years. The reincarnation of Kikyo is Kagome Higurashi, named by her parents after the sparkling light they witnessed from the jewel during her birth. Of course, neither of them realize that there's an actual jewel inside their daughter. At the age of 5, Kagome's father is killed in a car accident, leading her, her mother, and her unborn brother Sota to move in with her grandfather at the Higurashi Shrine. She grows up in this household until her 15th birthday. The shrine itself is located right beside the very same sacred tree that Inuyasha was pinned to 500 years prior. The tree survived into the modern era, under which Kagome's father proposed to her mother. Sadly, the Bone Eater's Well also remains, which now has a well house built around it. Kagome doesn't really appreciate the history of her family shrine and dismisses much of its legends as mere folklore. That changes, however, when she steps near the well, once again stirring the bones of Mistress Centipede with the jewel's presence. The centipede rises from the dead once more and pulls Kagome into the well, attempting to steal the jewel within her. Thankfully, both the jewel and Kagome's purity allow her to repel the centipede for a time. That said, the Bone Eater's Well is more mysterious than anyone initially gave it credit for. In conjunction with the Shikon Jewel, the well serves as a portal between the feudal era and Kagome's modern era. Thus, her confrontation with Mistress Centipede winds up sending Kagome into the past, just around 50 years after Inuyasha was pinned to the sacred tree. By this point, Naraku screwed quite a few people over, and others like Kaede have aged considerably. Demons like Inuyasha, however, have much longer lifespans. When Kagome finds him, he's just as young and angsty as always. Kagome is brought to Kaede's village until Mistress Centipede emerges yet again to attack. Kagome makes a run for it back to the sacred tree, causing Inuyasha to awaken from what smells like Kikyo's blood. Of course, despite her being a reincarnation, Kagome isn't Kikyo. She has her own identity, experiences, will, and personality. Sure enough, after getting a better sniff, Inuyasha realizes this. Mistress Centipede catches up and bites a mild chunk out of Kagome's side, revealing the reincarnated jewel. It's as strong as ever, so when the centipede devours it, she transforms to become considerably more intimidating. Inuyasha suspects that Kagome may be able to pull out Kikyo's arrow, and she does so because she'd rather trust Inuyasha than let herself be crushed by the centipede. Now free, Inuyasha tears through their common enemy as promised, but as soon as Kagome identifies which piece of flesh contains the jewel, he threatens to take it for himself. Turns out, before she died, Kikyo already had a method of taming Inuyasha's demon instincts, the beads of subjugation. She'd meant to give him this necklace of beads to help him live more peacefully, but never got the chance. Well, Kaede held on to those beads, and finally takes the chance to seal them around Inuyasha's neck. While they were meant to ensure he obeyed Kikyo, they apparently listened to Kagome's commands too. Sit, boy! Thanks to the beads, Inuyasha can't do anything to Kagome or the jewel. Nonetheless, he sticks nearby, waiting for his chance, which is actually convenient. Now that the jewel is returned, demons can feel it and begin seeking out the village. In particular, a crow demon steals it and tries to fly away. Inuyasha manages to tear the bird apart, but it regenerates and takes to the skies again while leaving its foot behind. As it's about to get away, Kagome gets an idea to use the crow's detached foot to guide an arrow. Since demons covet the jewel, naturally the foot would lead the arrow straight to it. Kagome fires off an arrow and it works, sorta. While the bird gets blasted to pieces, so too does the jewel. In a brilliant display, the jewel's fragments scatter all across Japan. Ah, shit. Sadly, even one of these shards is enough to considerably strengthen a demon, meaning that Kagome accidentally screwed over the entire country. In response, Kaede recommends Kagome and Inuyasha form a team. As a reincarnation of Kikyo, Kagome can sense and purify the jewel shards, while Inuyasha has the strength to reclaim them from the clutches of evil. Problem is, the two don't really get along very well. Inuyasha's birdwatching days are over. They have a falling out at the same time as a new demon comes to town. Yura, a demon of hair, manifests from a comb that gained power by being used to comb the hair of the dead. She takes the form of a total hottie, attacking through a massive network of hair that binds people to be manipulated like marionettes. Seeking the only jewel shard recovered thus far, Yura attempts to kill Kagome, only to accidentally send her falling into the Bone Eater's well once more. Luckily, this sends Kagome back to her time, giving her some well-needed respite from the chaos of the past. Her family is surprisingly understanding, too, no doubt thanks to Crazy Grandpa's stories. While trying to enjoy a decent evening at home, Inuyasha busts through the door, trying to get her back. He followed Kagome into the well, allowing him to travel to the future. Problem is, he unintentionally brought with him a connecting strand of Yura's hair. As a result, a mass of hairs begin to emerge from the well, prompting Kagome and Inuyasha to return to the past and put a stop to Yura's assault. They discover that Yura won't die from being wounded, leading Kagome to reveal the demon's true form, the comb concealed in a red skull. While Inuyasha protects her, Kagome shatters the skull, in turn vanquishing Yura. Meanwhile, Sesshomaru is searching the country for his father's tomb, hoping to claim Tessaiga for himself. He is accompanied by Jaken. Jaken is an imp who pledged to serve Sesshomaru after being saved from a demon attack on his village. While small and weak, Jaken makes himself useful by wielding the Nintojo, or Staff of Two Heads, which can spread both searing fire and torrential water. Jaken's been using the staff to search for Toga's tomb, and believes Inuyasha may know of its location because the staff has been acting strange ever since Inuyasha was freed from the tree. At the same time, Inuyasha is visited by his father's servant, a flea demon named Myoga, who is entrusted as the protector of Tessaiga's hiding place. Sadly, even he doesn't know its exact location, rendering him practically worthless. As such, Inuyasha is given little to no warning when Sesshomaru arrives and antagonizes him. Following Jaken's plan, Inuyasha is deceived by a demon known as the Unmother, born from various mothers grieving the children they'd lost to famine and war. Hoping to feed upon Inuyasha's soul, to use his soul to fill her childless void, the Unmother takes the form of Inuyasha's deceased mom and lures him into revealing what he knows about the tomb. Kagome sees through the illusion and saves Inuyasha, but not before Sesshomaru learns what he needs to know. He extracts the black pearl from Inuyasha's eye, and together they travel to the isolated tomb. There, Sesshomaru finds the Tessaiga, but fails to pull it from its resting place due to his demon purity and hatred for humanity. Arrogantly, Inuyasha also tries to claim the sword, after Myoga explains that it was meant for him. He too fails. Oddly enough, it is Kagome who draws the sword, and while she gives it to Inuyasha, it proves to be useless in combat despite saving her from Sesshomaru's poisonous claws. Of course, this is because Tessaiga only responds when Inuyasha wishes to use it for saving another human. Only after he declares his intent to protect Kagome does Tessaiga begin to pulse and take on its larger stature. With it, Inuyasha is able to lop off Sesshomaru's arm, whilst in full demon form. With the Tessaiga in tow, Inuyasha and Kagome begin their journey to gather all the Shikon jewel shards. They aren't the only ones gathering shards, though. Two demons called the Thunder Brothers have been going around killing folks to amass more shards, and in their onslaught they ravage a fox village. The younger brother, Manten, wears the fox leader's pelt around his waist. This traumatizes the fox demon's son, a young kitsune named Shippo, who vows to take revenge on the brothers, but feels he needs the power of a jewel shard to stand a chance against them. As a result, he decides to try and steal the shards Kagome and Inuyasha gathered, thinking they'd be easy targets. Despite being a bit of a mischievous brat, a trickster who fights using fox magic, Shippo means well and doesn't want to hurt them. Kagome senses this and comes to his aid, reluctantly drawing in Inuyasha to confront the brothers. During the fight, Manten is killed, enraging Hiten. Kagome, continuing to improve her archery, uses Shippo as a bow to shoot Hiten's wheel. In retaliation, Hiten attacks them, and they appear to be consumed by flames. Inuyasha fights on, thinking Kagome and Shippo are dead, but after slaying Hiten, he discovers the two were protected by foxfire from Shippo's dad. The last of the father's energy was used to save his son. Poor Shippo, orphaned by this ordeal, joins up with Kagome's party. Regrettably, spending all this time in the feudal era causes trouble for Kagome. Her school and social life are suffering, so she decides to go back home for a time, bringing the jewel shards with her. Obviously, there are fewer demons running amok in the modern era, but that doesn't mean some haven't lingered in dormancy for 500 years. When Kagome returns home, her collected shards reawaken a demon No Mask that has its own shard. It rampages through Kagome's hometown, but is slayed once and for all when Inuyasha comes to the rescue. That said, considering they retrieved a shard from the mask in the present, couldn't they also go back to the past and still find it? Are they able to make more shards that way? Gotta love time travel shenanigans. The more important thing is that Kagome can't simply abandon her quest, as it has the potential to threaten both the past and present. Though if you think messing with temporal paradoxes is bad, that ain't nothing compared to grave robbing. An Oni witch named Urasue, hoping to gain a pawn in gathering jewel shards, steals Kikyo's remains and tries to revive her using a body of clay and bones. It won't animate without a soul, however, and so Urasue kidnaps Kagome in hopes of using her soul to animate Kikyo's false body. This works, but it's not a pleasant awakening. Fittingly, Kikyo's pissed. She torches Urasue, and still thinking Inuyasha betrayed her, begins to attack. Kagome is caught between this lover's quarrel as her soul seeps into Kikyo. She takes control after hearing Inuyasha's suffering, and while Kagome reclaims most of her soul, Kikyo manages to retain enough of it to survive as she falls from a cliff. The event messes with Inuyasha. Lingering feelings encroach on his desire to become a full demon, which in turn strain his budding affection for Kagome. While down on their luck, they encounter a traveling monk named Miroku. You see, during the 50 years since Kikyo's funeral, Naraku's been screwing over the country. Miroku is one of his victims, or more specifically, Miroku's grandfather Miyatsu. Miyatsu battled Naraku on several occasions. On their last bout, Naraku took the form of a beautiful woman, deceiving Miyatsu and piercing his hand. The result was a curse, the Kazana, or wind tunnel. On the surface, the curse is helpful in that it grants users the ability to suck up matter into a vast portal in their hand. They can control the tunnel by sealing it behind prayer beads. As the years progress, however, this hole in their hand will continue to widen, until ultimately swallowing them into its void. Even worse, the curse passes down to Miyatsu's descendants, leaving Miroku with the cursed hand as well. To avoid being swallowed by his own wind tunnel, Miroku must end the curse by killing Naraku, but if that fails, he must continue his family lineage so that his descendants can give it a shot. His priorities are to kill Naraku and find a woman who will bear him children. Thus, when Inuyasha and Kagome come around with their jewel fragments, Miroku feels he can catch two birds with one stone. He lusts after both Kagome's bathing body and her collection of jewel shards. With the help of his raccoon demon friend Hachi, Miroku makes his move, trying to make a getaway with Kagome in tow while escaping from Inuyasha. Ultimately, Kagome notices how Miroku doesn't want to hurt anyone, and takes a risk by jumping toward his wind tunnel. Sure enough, Miroku stops his assault, refusing to swallow Kagome. Regardless of his concern for human safety, he's still a total womanizer, and tries to capitalize on the situation. After agreeing to a ceasefire, Miroku explains his curse and motivation. He also clarifies that Naraku is the one who betrayed Kikyo 50 years prior. Miroku joins forces with Inuyasha, Kagome, and Shippo under the idea that, if they work together in gathering the shards, they're sure to run into Naraku at some point. This happens rather quickly, actually. Naraku wants Inuyasha dead as well as the shards, and he teams up with Sesshomaru, who still wants Tessaiga. Conveniently, now that he's missing an arm, Naraku offers him a human arm which will allow him to wield the sword. Also rather conveniently, as soon as Kagome's party recruits someone as powerful and useful as Miroku, Naraku devises a countermeasure, the Saimyosho, nasty little wasps that harm the wind tunnel when sucked into it. Their poison prevents Miroku from utilizing his main talent, allowing Sesshomaru to steal the Tessaiga and show Inuyasha up by using it to legit slay 100 demons in a single strike. It's a technique called the Wind Scar, which targets the rift between the opposing demonic auras of the user and their enemy, releasing a devastating wave of energy. Our heroes are backed into a corner. Inuyasha can't beat his brother, Miroku can't use his wind tunnel, and even though Kagome's gotten hella better at archery, her attacks merely antagonize Sesshomaru further. Thus, during the fight, Kagome is knocked into a rock and loses consciousness. Inuyasha tries to avenge her, and manages to remove Sesshomaru's arm while getting pierced by his poison claws. While weakened and barely conscious, Inuyasha is able to resonate with Tessaiga and fend off Jokin and his brother. Sesshomaru believes Naraku set him up and decapitates him, only to discover it's an illusion. Naraku ain't gonna die that easily. With the danger cranked up to a whole new level, Inuyasha wants to protect Kagome by sending her home. After a warm embrace, he steals her shards and pushes her into the well, sending her to the future with seemingly no way to return. Oddly enough, the mechanics of the well are poorly defined. Sometimes, Inuyasha can use the darn thing just because of his connection to Kagome, and here, she can't use it without a jewel shard. With that, however, we've reached the end of part 1 of this video series. Look forward to part 2 soon. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this channel, help me beat the algorithm by liking, commenting, and sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and, most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of my anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content. If you want to support me directly, there are now 3 ways that all provide the same benefits. You can click Join here on YouTube, or join Patreon or Subscribestar for access to exclusive vids and early access. As always, celebrate your fandom.